All right, so welcome back everybody, and thank you for being here for our panel, the Teaching Strategies panel. We have award-winning teachers here, eager and willing to share their experiences with you and talk a little bit about those. So I will hand it off to Dr. Joel Alejandro Mejia, who's an associate professor at the University of Texas, San Antonio, and he will be introducing the panelists as well as himself. Thank you for being here.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. And I just want to introduce first our panelists. We have Dr. Richard Velasco, Joanna Brown, Ramon Benavidez, and I believe we also have Bruce Wellman. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to get started with some of the questions. So let's start first with Dr. Richard Velasco.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mejia. My name is Richard Velasco. I am a clinical assistant professor of STEM education at the University of Iowa. I was a secondary math teacher for 12 years, 9 years on Guam, where I'm from, and 3 years in Eastern Washington State. I was a presidential awardee for the Excellence in Mathematics Science Teaching in 2014, and I am also a STEM ambassador. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Velasco. Next, we have Joanna Brown.
Hello, my name is Joanna Brown. I teach chemistry, AP Chemistry, and AP Computer Science at Pullman High School. It's in rural Eastern Washington, and that's how I know Richard. We actually were able to teach together, and he helped inspire me to apply for PAMEST, and I am a finalist in 2021 this year, and I'm just really excited to be here.
Thank you, Joanna. Next, we have Ramon Benavidez, and before we let him introduce himself, I just want to congratulate him. He was named the 2022 Teacher of the Year for the state of Texas. So, Mr. Ramon Benavidez, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Ramon Benavidez. I'm coming to you from El Paso, Texas, a borderline community. I'm a biology teacher and a science teacher for our STEM Academy. I'm also a lead teacher. We just created a brand new biotech pathway at Del Valle High School. I've been teaching science for the last 12 years. I've taught everywhere from physics, chemistry, but I focus more on biology. I also teach at our local community college. I'm a part-time adjunct as well. And this is the first for me, so I'm honored to be with these amazing educators and advocates. Thanking Dr. Velasco for the invitation and looking forward to sharing our strategies with you all.
Thank you, Mr. Benavidez. And then last but not least, we have Bruce Wellman.
Good morning. My name is Bruce Wellman. I am a high school chemistry and engineering teacher. I teach in a public high school outside of Kansas City. I am a 2009 Presidential Award winner, and I'm a nationally board certified teacher. So I became involved in engineering education and have done a lot of work in that area on the national level, as well as in the state of Kansas. When we adopted the next generation science standards, was involved in being kind of the lead reviewer for our state. So I'm thankful to be here, and hopefully we'll be able to share something that has maybe just an encouragement for those who are thinking about diving deeper into ways to motivate students in STEM education.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here and for being part of the of this session. I'm going to start asking some questions, and then at the end, if we have some time, we can let our panelists ask, our attendees ask any questions if they have any. So let's start with the first question. What inspires you to do your work and obviously come up with different strategies for teaching STEM? And let's start with Mr. Benavidez.
All right. When it comes to what inspires me to do what I do and the different strategies I use, I always have started with two groups of individuals, and that's my parents and my students. When I mentioned my parents because my parents were migrant field workers who dropped out early in life to work the fields. They had to survive. But late in life, once their kids started getting older, my siblings started getting older, my siblings and I started getting older, they went back to school, and late in life, they became educators. So that inspired me, especially when I stepped foot into the classroom. Their story has driven me into what I want to do and what I want to continue to do. And I use that to inspire my kids as well. But another one is my students. So what I do day in and day out for our kids is because of the lack of opportunities I had growing up. It took 2 years into my business major in college to finally figure out that I wanted to be in science. It took a professor who captivated an auditorium and allowed me to believe that I could actually learn science. And I don't want that to happen to our kids, especially the kids that come into my classroom. I don't want them to wait until their second year of college to figure out and realize that, you know, science or STEM is for them. So what I do, as soon as they walk onto our campus, even through meeting the middle schools and our different feeder patterns, I'm always presenting the different opportunities we have on our campus. And if we don't have those opportunities, I'm always finding ways to create those opportunities. So I mentioned it before, and I continue through the different speaking engagements that I have, is that as teachers, we become opportunity facilitators. And that's what we do. We try to create these opportunities, and especially for me, because of the background I had, the opportunities I didn't have, and I don't want my kids to go through the same thing. So what I do is I use their lived experiences. Every one of our students brings something to the table. Each one of our students brings a lived experience, and we tie that into STEM. We tie that into science. Through those lived experience, they don't know, but I allow them to make that connection. At one point, they were engineering something. At one point, when they were cooking or doing something, they were doing science and chemistry. At one point, when they were helping their grandmothers, even though with the plants outside the yard or with their different gardens, they were actually doing science. They've done research. They've done everything. It's just they don't know that they've done it. And once they start they see that they can tie that to those lived experiences, their confidence changes. They start empowering themselves, and you start seeing that transformation because they start to believe they have that foundation now based on their lived experiences, that they have that foundation to grow and to take it to the next step. So once again, I don't want them to wait until they're in college to realize that, or just not realize at all that they could have been a student of science or a student of STEM. And that's what I bring to my classroom. Those are the two things, and that's what inspires me. And once again, one of my main strategies is the main strategy that I use in my classroom is acknowledging these lived experiences, that all of our students bring a certain something to the table, a certain gift, something they've done in the past with their families or through just their lived experiences. And we can use that and allow them to believe that they can learn science and they can do STEM.
Yes, definitely. I believe that, you know, talking about those past experiences is super important, right? And what we call in the research, their funds of knowledge, right? And their capital, the capital that they bring into their classrooms. Joanna, Dr. Velasco, Mr. Wellman, any additional comments on this question?
Ramon did make me think of our biology team at my school made this great NGSS science and engineering practices card sort. And they came up with little like high school things that people do. And they had students put those into, you know, is this asking good questions? Where does this go in terms of those sets? And students really saw that what they are doing all the time is science and engineering. And it was such an easy activity. I'm going to try and get it so I can share with people. But you can do really little things to help students see that they're already doing it and that a scientist isn't this old white dude in a lab coat. We got to get that out.
I think for me, the idea of helping students look at the problems in their own community is really motivating to me in the engineering education space, because I look around and just try to help them see it's not about learning about solving necessarily big problems, which is true, we do, but we look at what is local and said, hey, do you see this problem? And can you analyze it's there? Then let's make a difference, let's do it. And I think so long science has been about talking about what other people have done versus saying, what is it that we need to do? And I think for me, that's been a big shift to help motivate students to say, hey, if you're not experienced science and you're not experiencing engineering as a helping profession, I don't think you're really having an authentic experience. And so for me, that's been a major shift to try to help students see that if they can identify what needs to be done in their community, they can make a difference. And engineering and science is just a tool that as they become stronger in that, they're able to really make a profound impact on people's lives.
And just to echo everyone else's sentiments and highlight what Ramon said about empowerment, I think there is a misconception that we can't create these communities of inquiry with our students, that it's only relegated for scientists or those who are doing specific research, whatever that's defined as. But what inspires me is that when I come into my classroom with my mathematicians, that we can establish this community of inquiry with them through the empowerment. So as I empower them, I'm feeling empowered myself. And then we just kind of get into this snowball effect of everybody's thinking, and we're creating thinking classrooms. And that's what I really inspired by.
Thank you everyone for, for those wonderful, strategies to engage our students in STEM. I guess the next question is, what resources, right? Now that we talked about the strategies, what would be some of the resources that you would recommend to people who are out there, and maybe they're just barely starting, as a STEM educators, and particularly in terms of engineering education? Mr. Wellman, if you want to get us started. I think you're muted. You're muted, Mr. Wellman.
Sorry about that. Yep, doing a Zoom thing. That's we've been in person for a while. I'm not as fast on the Zoom draw anymore. Oh, check the microphone. Now we're back on. Okay. I dropped a link in the chat box dealing with teachengineering.org. To me, this is a really great resource. One of my friends and colleagues at the University of Colorado Boulder is really kind of in charge of bringing this particular project together. It's a great opportunity for a science or math or any type of educator who says, hey, I'd like to put in a little bit of a flavor of engineering into what I do. And when you go to that website, you're able to see that they have a lot of resources and a lot of ways to get at the resources. So let's say, with Richard, a math teacher, I can come in and look at math and physics and said, hey, let me look at something that's maybe dealing with proportions. And I drop in there and I can search for it. And there's a lot of activities that you can say, okay, hey, this would work for me, or I can modify it easier. I don't know about a lot of you, but for me I think I'm a creative person, but sometimes I don't have enough energy to start from ground zero. And so when you go to teachengineering.org, it is a great springboard where you can say, oh, I can do that, or I can do this part of it. And it's easy access to it. It makes these kind of projects that you can do with low budget materials. It's not like you have to have, I don't have a compression tester. You can do a lot of these things with very simple ones, because it's about having students identify a problem, have them think about it, and collaborate together. Like, what could we do together? And I think one of the powers of the engineering piece with this is about embracing everyone's background. It's not like as if I didn't grow up in a certain area, I don't have an experience. No, all experiences are valued. And when you have a diverse team in that design solution, you're much more likely to have a solution that really works for all people. So that's a great resource that I go to. Whether you're a science teacher, whether you're a math teacher, you can be able to pick up a number of things quickly. And there's also ways you can kind of get some other ideas for it as well. So that's one resource I think is very accessible. I've used it a lot in my particular teaching.
Anybody else who wants to add to some of those resources?
I just popped STEM teaching tools into the chat. It's work out of the University of Washington. And they are these great little briefs about absolutely everything, but they're really equity focused. They're really about helping students be comfortable and safe in a STEM classroom. So I would check those out.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Velasco.
Yeah, so I don't have a link or anything to share with that. I think my colleagues have done sufficient amount of work to kind of share that with you. But one thing that I did want to point out is sometimes the best resource is right next door to you or within your building, which is a possible mentor, because I'm seeing that the question is asking for those just starting out in STEM education. And I think the most valuable resource for me that I had as a beginning STEM educator was a mentor. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal mentor that was assigned by the district, but somebody who I can turn to, I can ask questions and debrief about my lessons and come in and observe me. I learned a lot from this mentor teacher that I had when I was a first year teacher. And I almost gave up on the teaching profession, but if it wasn't for her, I stuck through it. And I attribute everything that I am today as a STEM teacher leader to what she started. And along the way, I've found other multiple informal mentors along the way. So.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Velasco.
For me, it's about also networking. When you go to professional developments, anytime you have an opportunity to meet other teachers from across campuses, across the district and so forth, or even right here across the nation, sometimes we've been in Zoom professional developments, is get information, network, never be afraid to ask questions, never be afraid to contact someone, send that email. either they don't respond or you get a response, and if you get a response, you're going to learn something new. And another one for me is the younger teachers. I've been doing this in my 13th year, but there's this, I heard a speaker once say, become a fan of someone. And what I do, there's this teacher across another campus in my district, and I love the work that he does. And we ended up just setting up meetings where we go and meet with each other, every 2 months or so, and we learn from each other. And especially, he's new to the profession, but I'm learning from him. And do that. Never be afraid to ask questions. Never be able to reach out, and also never reach out to the younger teachers. As Mr. Wellman said, sometimes you don't want to start from ground zero. Look for those little pockets of creativity from someone else and build upon them. And that's one of the things I do. I'm never afraid to reach out to someone, never afraid to network, and never afraid to ask a newer teacher what ideas are they bringing, what's something different, and become a fan of them. So that's one of the strategies I use.
Thank you.
If I could jump in just one more, I'll throw at the end for you. I put this one in the thing. It's called FET simulations. Now, it looks like I'm probably the oldest one in the group. So when I was going through school, we dealt with things called textbooks, and everything was static. And for when I began to learn and do the teaching, this FET simulations, if you've not been there, most of them kind of experience, but that is kind of getting a community like Ramon was talking about, this, seeking out colleagues that have it. That's a great community, because even as a math science teacher, it allows you to have moving or dynamic models that students have to be able to interact with. And it's a great way to get students thinking about changing variables and saying, what impact does that have? And let's do another one. So that's it's open, available for everyone. There's great lessons that you can get from that as well too. So those of you starting out, if you haven't done a dynamic simulation thing, that's free, and it's a great way to jump off and do.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So many resources out there, right? And I encourage you all to also, like Mr. Benavides mentioned, right, to reach out to others in the school district, right, or even at your own school, and come up with different ways of implementing, engineering activities in your classrooms. I think that co-construction of knowledge is very, very important. So now we've talked about some of those resources, some of those strategies, but there's always that question of, how do we really get the students to feel like they belong in the classroom, right? How do we ensure that students who want to pursue STEM, particularly in this case, engineering, right, are encouraged to, pursue these careers by your teaching? How do you do it? So let's start with Joanna.
Yeah, so when I think about this question, I think about what is keeping people out of STEM. I was kind of like Ramon. I didn't sign up for honors science because I thought I wasn't good enough when I was 13. And it really took me a long time to figure out that I could belong here. And Bruce touched on this, but when we are disconnecting student learning so much from humanity and cultural experiences, we are doing a disservice to students. And when I have students come to me, they're like, I'm so excited for chemistry. I've had the periodic table memorized since I was 7. I'm like, oh no. We're not doing science when we're so based on this memorization, on this rigor, which is my least favorite word this month, and weeding students out in high school and in college. We're just really gatekeeping and oppressing people by engaging in this. And I think too, in maybe smaller ways that are also harmful, when we penalize students for failure, for not allowing them to redo things. I think we're really pushing people out of what scientists actually do and the skills that they need to have. So some things that I've just been working on is my grading. So I've gone to an ungrading conference-based system where students don't get points for anything, they just get lots of feedback for everything they're doing. So I love I'm not ranking them. We're just trying to help them figure out what assets they're bringing. And I was in I'm at a conference right now, I'm in Portland. I was at a session yesterday talking about moving away from saying, what is the misconception the student has, and going, what assets are they bringing? What connections are they making? And helping them grow from there. And I think that's how we get students to bring their interests and their identities into their classrooms when they feel safe to do that. And something else I think is just specifically inviting students to be scientists as they get older too. Talking to them about future careers and saying, I really could see you do this. Sometimes you just need a person saying, you're good enough to apply to be Texas Teacher of the Year. Sometimes you just need somebody else saying, hey, you are great and you should try this. And I've kind of done some of that through conferencing. So conference grades, I really get to sit down and talk to students and make them feel like part of what we're doing. So I think it's really intentional work that we should all be engaging in.
Thank you, Johanna. Any other thoughts from our panelists?
In my context, I work really hard to try to help frame professional skills to help them see that, hey, this is what we're talking. We happen to have Garmin is in our school district. So we talk about things to say, well, what is the skill set that you'll need to go forward, and trying to help them always be aware of building their awareness of networking like we've talked about here. Because a lot of students, unless you've come from a family that has understood kind of the post-secondary options, that you don't. So we talk a lot about, even in 10th grade chemistry, about what is the skill set you would have. And I encourage them to say, well, if you thought about getting a patent, if you start getting some great ideas, what would you have to have in a research notebook to be able to do that? And said, you do realize people your age are making money on patents, right? And they're like, what? And so trying to help them see that, no, this is not something unattainable out there. It's within your realm, and starting to see that innovation and creation is something that everyone can do. And when you have an idea, go with it. And if you need to, hey, I can help you point in the direction. I don't know everything. And I think that's the other thing to help model, that I don't know everything. And as a teacher, they don't have to say, but that's okay. But I've learned what questions to ask and who to ask them toward. And that's kind of what I can encourage you and coach you through, at least can launch you. And I think that's kind of the piece too that helps as a teacher to say, I'm really a launcher. I am launching you in to post-secondary, and I can help you see some of them. I can't give you the pathway. You've got to find your own pathway. But I think talking about those things and moving away, like Joanna said, like to me, grades, I've not gone completely open. Joanna, she's going to inspire me to do more. But I always have every score is redoable, because I said, I'm not scoring you on how fast you got it. A scientist, I said, for me, I'm fortunate to have an NSF grant working on engineering education. It was my 5th attempt. That was not my first, but I kept going. And that was like a dream for mine, to be able to be a high school teacher and be part of a research team. So I kind of modeled those things and said, hey, you don't give up after the first one. Let's talk, let's kind of do the conference thing Joanna talked about, but keep moving. So I think there are some very intentional things we can do about our own shift of how we talk in the classroom and how we think about, am I really teaching or am I a launcher?
And co-telling on that, back to with my kids, to ensure that they're encouraged in STEM is about the successes, but also about the failures, about learning how to get back up. I always tell my kids, it's all about the pop-ups. How are you going to pop back up? The first time you tried it, like, we're all here because of second chances. Everything that we've done is because of second chance. Someone has given us a second chance at something, and we've taken that opportunity and we ran with it. And I want our kids to understand that as well. It's not about always being successful. Is that you're going to have these failures, but how are you going to learn from them, and how are you going to pop back up and get yourself going again? And that's important. Exactly what Mr. Wellman said. Like I said, co-telling on that.
And just to add on just a little bit from the practical standpoint, I follow a lot of math educators on Twitter and everything. So I just like this idea of representation. And I have one person that I follow who is a real proponent for this this hashtag remark that she calls math gals. And I love that she promotes that, because we don't see a lot of girls in mathematics and things like that. So by being able to showcase mathematicians and female mathematicians, mathematicians from underrepresented populations, I think just having that like in your classroom, being able to showcase what they've done and all of that, not just mathematicians, but scientists as well, is something that we can do to encourage those in these underrepresented populations to pursue STEM.
Thank you all. Thank you for sharing these thoughts. I completely agree, right? It is so important to help the students position themselves as, you know, as engineers, as scientists, as mathematicians, right? That they can, you know, providing them with those opportunities to see themselves reflected in STEM is super important. And I want to remind the attendees, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We'll try to have some time at the end, you know, to review those questions. But if there's something that comes up and you have a question, please feel free to add it onto the chat. So we've talked about, you know, the resources. We've talked about how we want to encourage our students to pursue this STEM careers. But then a lot of the times we get this conflicting messages, right, of what success is supposed to look like, right? If we want our students to be successful in STEM, right, like what are some of those messages that we are communicating to our students? And so my question is, how is STEM success defined in your classroom? Dr. Velasco, let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think how I define STEM in my classroom, I think, let me go back. So if I was first year, second, third, fourth, fifth year Mr. Velasco in my classroom, I probably would have said something like they passed the test, or they met a certain percentile at the high stakes testing score and all of that, or they received an award. So a lot of it was very extrinsic, and a lot of it was very much those who are literally somebody that I had like pinpointed to be like a scientist or a mathematician. That's how I would define success. So since then, though, I've kind of grown from that mindset. I've kind of grown into thinking that that's not necessarily the only aspect of success in terms of how my students are being successful in STEM. These days, I'm trying to find ways to encourage that desire and that joy for STEM, if that makes any sense. So as I tell my pre-service teachers, we're teaching content, but we're teaching humans first. We're teaching students first, and that we need to teach them to find the motivation and to find the love for STEM. So in my classroom, I find a student who starts to come to class, like what Joe was saying earlier about, you know, a student that comes into our class and says, I'm so excited to learn chemistry today, and I always look forward to coming to your class. To me, that is success in STEM. Like, you know, you have made the student feel successful, and I think that's success in itself. I'll never forget I'll share a little anecdote here, and it was actually during my time at Pullman High School with Ms. Brown, and I was teaching my Algebra 2 class, and so I'm from Guam, and I had one Pacific Islander student there, and she was from Tonga, and you know, she was the only Pacific Islander, she was the only a student of color in there, and I was the only other person of color. And at the end of a school year, I always give my students evaluations just for my own sake and just how I can improve my teaching. I'll never forget the comment that she put on her evaluation, and it said something like, I was really glad to see somebody of Pacific Islander descent in the classroom, because it really does make a difference. And that really touched my heart. To me, like, that was success in STEM. And I don't know where she's at now. I'm not sure if she pursued a career in STEM per se, but the fact that she came out of my classroom enjoying mathematics, and she looked forward to coming to class, and that she was glad that I was there, being able to see somebody who had the same skin color as her, you know, I think was really important. So to me, again, just highlighting the joy and desire, because I think that just trickles down into everything else. Then they're more inclined to pursue STEM because they see somebody else who looks like them pursuing it, or they start to enjoy it, and they start to think, yes, I can, and I can do that. So like, kind of like going what everyone else was saying, I don't really put so much pressure on the scores or on the grades so much, but more about the dispositions that we have towards STEM, and how students feel about STEM. And kind of echoing also what Ramon said about just being able to communicate to the students that it's okay to fail, because failing, you know, is our best teacher, in that we can learn a lot from, and you know, that's what scientists do. Like, we test and we make mistakes, and we learn from them. So.
Thank you, Dr. Velasco. Mr. Benavides.
Yeah, Dr. Velasco, you beat me to the punch. I had a story about success. And so about 2 years ago, they gave me the opportunity to become the science fair coordinator for our school. It was after a 6-year hiatus. I didn't know the first thing about the science fair and so forth. So the first year we did pretty well. So last year, of course, we're in pandemic and we're still having a science fair. And they gave us the option to not do it, but I couldn't. I knew the kids, this is something to keep the kids going, keep them motivated, give them a goal or something. And for me, success this past year is, I'm gonna go into a little story as well, is I had a little girl, right when school started, she lost her mom due to COVID. And I had a meeting with her and I told her, a virtual meeting, I told her, you know what, you don't have to do the science fair. I know it's extra, and you can stay out of it. She goes, no, I'm looking forward to this. This is gonna keep my mind busy. This is gonna keep me going. And her project, and her partner's project, they won at the campus science fair. They went to the district science fair. They won there also. And she made it all the way to regionals as a little freshman. And all the obstacles, she showed perseverance. She showed, for me, that was success in itself. Like I could have closed out the year at the end of the semester. I could have closed out the year, and I would have been happy with what I saw. And it's the intangible. It's a stuff that we can't see that, for me, that defines success. It's easy back at, like Dr. Velasco says, in my early years, like, oh, my kids, I had a 95% passing rate on our state test. To me, that was success. But now as I've gotten older, and as educators, you start to reflect a little bit more, and you start looking at, are you really reaching everybody? And not just reaching them, but are you really getting deep inside? And it goes back to, I know in the beginning, when it first came out, it was a buzzword. But for me, I truly look at the social emotional part now, after my experience during the pandemic, when our kids were suffering family loss of neighbors and so forth. And they still were able to get into our classrooms, and they were still there, willing to learn, willing to take on anything we gave them. And that for me was success. And that the pandemic has changed everything as how I define success in the classroom, back to what everybody has been saying. It's the little things that start adding up, and that's where you start measuring what success truly is.
I know in my classroom, I make an intentional shift that I talk about mastery. I said, have you mastered this particular skill? Because my job is to help them see why that skill is important and how it builds further. But I've always challenged them. I said, you do know that you don't get paid for filling out worksheets, right? So it's the ability to actually master a skill set and do something with it. So for me, I've had a very intentional pushback that I don't talk about grades. I've changed my grading system to a 4-point scale, freaks them out. And I go, well, I'm not getting a 90. I said, I'm not talking about percentage. I said, have you mastered it? Do you have evidence of mastery? Now, my tools for seeking mastery or measuring your mastery are not perfect. So I would like you to help me. If this measurement is not accurate, please help me. Let's discuss other forms of evidence that would really be convincing and really speak to your strengths, because I want them to do that. And so I think for me, it's that success is about seeing that I can master small things, but I can master and I can persevere. That if I have one area that I maybe didn't master, that's okay. I maybe need a little bit of work, but these things, wow, I knocked this out of the park. I was able to master that, and then help them explore. The other big piece that I do in my class is success is about also being able to reach a goal as a group. And so I have collaborative groups in 10th grade that's how we work. You walk in my room and they go, where are the rows of chairs? I go, why? I don't know. I think people collaborate nowadays. I don't think we're sitting in lines. I don't know. My brother who works in there, that's not how they sit. So we're sitting in collaborative groups. And I said, hey, can you get everyone on your team to reach mastery? And if you do that, you know what? Everyone's going to want to be on your team. And we work a lot about facilitation skills and saying, has everyone's voice been heard? And if you feel that you've had every voice in your group heard and moving forward, that's going to be the kind of person that you're going to want to have in life and on the team with. So I think it's making those kind of adjustments too, to say what is value. And it's, like I said, it's not the state test. It's not this one. It's about, can you work together? And I think really saying, and when you have a shared goal, but wow, and you get a team together with that, it's just, that is a powerful experience to go through. And so in our program, we get them to their 12th grade year where they have a capstone experience. And one of them is to build an electric car. It's a 1-seater electric car. They race it, called Electrathon. But you have these dependent teams. And when you see the card, now for us, success was like, it made a whole lap. You're like, yes. And other groups are like, but it said for us, that thing didn't work last week. We got everyone together. The brakes got on board. And so like, yeah. And you're able to say that was our shared goal and we accomplished it together. And so it wasn't, sometimes I think we all have to be very careful. What the literature is telling us about competition is not appealing to all individuals. Many young women, it's not as appealing, but we say, hey, do we have a shared goal? And is engineering a helping profession that some of those goals will be profoundly impacting people? That's really powerful. So I think helping students within the context, and even before they leave high school, having some kind of shared bigger goal that they have to reach, whether it's building an electric car, whether it's building a unique ramp at the library to make sure it's truly accessible, even though it's an old building. Who do they have to go to? They're not even the ones maybe building it, but they've taken it on as their charge. And when they see that ramp is built, they know that individuals that have accessibility issues can now get access to there. That's a shared goal and stuff too. So I think having that kind of a shift really helps students say that I'm learning because I want to master skills and make an impact. Yeah, okay, we gotta live in a grade world, but what's really important is it's about people.
Thank you so much for this insights. I think that it is very important to think about what success looks like for our students, right? And how we're communicating that to our students as well. I guess the next question that I have is particularly for teachers is very, very important because teachers do a lot of the heavy work, right? They are the ones coming up with these activities and going to their professional development. And they're being asked to do this one thing by their principals and this other thing by the school district and this other thing by the standards and the testing and da. So there's so many things going on for teachers. So how do you negotiate, first of all, positioning yourself as a teacher who has been asked to implement curriculum in STEM, and at the same time address the science standards, and at the same time trying to promote equal access to STEM education, and then obviously trying to follow whatever your district or your principal is asking you to do. It's a lot of heavy load. So let's start with Mr. Wellman. How do you do this?
There's been a number of points in my career where I was ready to walk away. And I think each time I had to be willing to take an honest review about what's important to me. And one of the times was there was such a lack of collaboration among fellow teachers. I realized I was like going to work and it felt like a desert. And I was trying to help the students, but I couldn't do it on my own. And I know I'm not a lone ranger type. That's not healthy. And so for me, I needed to make a pivot to a different school. And I'm thankful in that one I did, because I pivoted to the engineering program that I'm at now. And it has been a huge difference. And I think what happens is, as a teacher, we've got to be willing to stop and say, when the door is closed, I'm in charge. I have to be able to sleep at night. And you have to be willing to say what's really important. Unfortunately, in my career, I've attended 3 funerals of students who committed suicide within 3 years of having my class. That profoundly shifted me to say, I'm here and I want students to be able to feel connected and valued and see that they can make a difference and they're part of a community. They don't have to be a lone individual going through. So for me, after that shift, I said, I need to listen to the principal. I need to listen to state standards and I think, but those are like guiding principles. Ultimately, I need to find what's going to work for me to be true to those requirements, but ultimately be true to my clients, which is my students and my parents. So I think that's the piece where you find this balance, and that's where we've talked about the great comments about mentors and coaches and being able to do it as part of a community. Not because the principal says you need to be in a professional learning community, because we need each other to help support us. I think if ever there is a profession, and if ever we understood that, is through the COVID time, it's teaching. And so we have a unique balance to be able to be there with students, help them grow in their learning of my content, but more importantly, help them grow as humans. And so that's the piece, I think, where you have to be willing to step back. And this may sound radical for some, to take a sick day as a mental health day, to come back and have a day of perspective and be okay with that. That sometimes to be able to help students, I've got to have that balance. And so I think for me, I learn about state standards. I continue to look at those, but at the bottom line, at the end of the day, I have to sleep at night to feel like I've done what I could, and I am true to the requirements. And I'm also able to, this sounds weird too, but I have to put some limits and said, if this principal thinks I'm going to be on the same lesson on the same day at the same time, I said, I don't think that's what's healthy. I don't think what the literature says is good for learning. But if you feel that's important, then you need to document that, because I need to live with this. And if it means I've got to pivot to another school, I need to pivot to another thing, be okay with that. Having your own boundaries helps you put those kind of things in place with that. So that would just be my perspective.
Thank you so much for those insights. Anybody else who wants to jump in? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I have one thing. I was reading a couple years ago this article of indicators of white supremacy culture. And I think bullet number 3 was this idea of urgency and how we have all of this false urgency. And I thought, yeah, the only thing that should be urgent is if someone is at risk of being in harm's way. That's the only thing I want to be urgent. If a student doesn't learn something, if we need to do it another day, if they forgot to do the homework, I don't even really have homework, but if they forgot to do the thing they said they would do and they're emailing me at night, I tell them there is nothing urgent. There is nothing we cannot fix. And that helps me too. I'm a highly anxious person. I tell myself that too. It's all fixable. And when I worked on that mind shift with myself and my classroom and how I interact with other people, when I get an email about something and it seems kind of urgent, I can just remind myself, you know what, I will get to it when I get to it. And if it doesn't happen, then it wasn't meant to be, and it's okay. And that has really helped me in the last couple years with everything being so intense. It's just getting us out of this cycle of false urgency.
That's definitely a philosophy that I need to follow myself, that I need to adopt too. It's great suggestion. I love it. So we've been talking a lot about, how do we bring all of this into the classroom, but there's also something that we haven't really talked about, and that is access to STEM education, right? So how can we promote an equitable access to STEM education when we know that there are disparities, and those disparities exist from school to school, from district to district, right? How can we do that in our own classrooms, despite everything that's going on? How do we do it? Mr. Benavides, let's start with you.
For me, when I've read a lot of the literature about the STEM academies, and so a lot of STEM academies across the nation, a lot of them are still exclusive for honor students. And for me, it's those kids in the fringe, those kids, those bubble kids who are still dabbling. Do I want to go into STEM? Do I want to do science? Is that something for me? It's those kids that we know those honors kids are going to be in our STEM classes. We know those honors kids are going to be in the STEM academies. But what about those kids that are questioning, do I have what it takes? Those are the kids that we have to focus on, and that's what I do in my regular. I also teach regular biology classes, and as well as I teach for our STEM academy. But I always find ways and create opportunities, and I always go back to opportunities, creating opportunities for our kids to see that they can, and that goes for every student that sits in my classroom, and it goes back to that the whole social emotional part and their lived experiences. Like everybody has said, we know how to approach this, the equity and inclusivity in the classroom. We've all said a little bit of something throughout this panel, but at the same time, in order to reach these kids that are in the fringe, is allowing them to believe, allowing them to feel empowered, and allowing them to feel confident in themselves that they could take that next step and go for that STEM academy. You enter the STEM academy or be part of the different clubs that are out there. I ended up during the pandemic, I saw everything that was happening and I didn't want anything to crumble. So I started taking on roles upon myself. I jumped into helping our administration bring in that biomed pathway. Then I started, kids came up to me and said, we don't have anything in the medical field at our school. Well, let's create a medical sciences club. Then I became I had just taken on the role of a science fair coordinator. And I just started a new chapter of which has never happened at our school before, of the Science National Honor Society. It's creating these opportunities in order to provide those opportunities of equity and inclusivity for all of our students. And I'm going to continue to do that. And the pandemic got me started, but I'm not going to stop now. And I just want to share that with everyone, is any opportunity for yourself is also an opportunity for your kids. And that allows to equity in the classroom as well. But going back to what Mr. Wellman said about the sick day, another thing is I want to add to that a little bit, is I also give my kids every now and then, what are we going to do today? Absolutely nothing. Let's just talk. Let's just have conversations. Let's just, what's going on in life? What's going on with you? And it takes one of those days, because like Joanna said, eventually we're going to get to where we want to get to, but there's no sense of urgency. Let's take time to really, just be human and listen to each other. And that's another part of equity and inclusivity, is listening to the kids. Where are they at? How are they feeling? And there was a motivational speaker a couple of years ago. I heard him say, in order to teach them, you got to reach them first. And that's when it comes down to equity in the classroom as well. You got to reach each one of your students and make sure you're doing so. And by reaching them, that once again builds confidence, empowers them, and hopefully that across the board, from district to district to classroom, kids will start stepping up in STEM and in science, and we'll start seeing more females coming up, more underrepresented students taking those roles and taking the chances. Especially from what I've seen from my panel here, is that we like to push the envelope. We like to create change, but it's not because we want to do it for ourselves. We're doing it for them. And I love that. I love that about the panel. I love what you all are doing. And we got to continue doing it across the board, and share these stories and share all the information that we have, and continue to share it for everybody else.
So just springboarding off of what Ramon said, he had mentioned what he does like at the school and at the classroom level. I kind of want to speak a little bit about at the district level. And for me, just really shortly, it's the best way I think that we can promote equitable access to STEM education is to tap into people like we see here in our panel. We need to encourage administrators and district leaders to find more Bruces, to find more Johannas, to find more Ramons, to come out and advocate for STEM education, because we do it for this purpose, to make equitable access to STEM. And we were actually just having a conversation right before we started this panel earlier about like this idea of, we need these teachers to stay in the classroom, but we also need the teachers who are game changers, who are willing to go outside and beyond the four walls of the classroom and, speak on behalf of these students and advocate for them, and saying that these are the needs that we have our school. We need to push for after school STEM clubs. We need to have these community STEM outreach programs, and that, it takes a collective effort, collective efficacy within the school system to do that. So I would go as far as arguing like we need these administrators to be really supportive of these STEM teacher leaders. And when I say STEM teacher leaders, they're not necessarily STEM teachers who are coaches and who are not in the classroom, and that may certainly be the case, but we need to find ways to radicalize this change. Like Johanna was saying something about earlier about like maybe finding ways to support teachers who can like maybe teach 2 or 3 or 4 classes a day, but also have that support materially and also professionally to do this outside work as well. So if we can have our district leaders and administrators just be on the same page and knowing what is important and why STEM is important for our students, and that would be really helpful.
I think one of the things that I had to learn as a teacher is that as my door closes and I learn more about my students, I ask questions and I become aware of things that aren't right. And I mean, like, for instance, our school was trying in a good sense to have a late bus. We hadn't had a late bus. We wanted to make sure it was available for students for 1 day a week. They could get extra help. They could do these other programs, these clubs could do it. And it was a great idea, but then I realized in our particular program, we open it to everyone in the district. So some of our students that ride the bus, many of them, their families do not have access to be able to have a car for them to drive or things with that. They're dependent upon the school bus. But when they found out that they were only going to do it to local elementaries in our feeder, we said, hey, this excludes some of my kids who want to have this. And it's not equitable that only these are here. And sometimes being an advocate means that I also, though, have to work outside my classroom. And for some teachers, especially new in your career, that can be somewhat scary. But I always come back to, what am I going to sleep at night? And if I'm going to be worried about my kids and say, this isn't fair, then we have to do something. And I try to stay as polite and persistent and professional about it. But some people get uncomfortable, and I can't be responsible for their response if I ask tough questions about equity and fairness. And I need to be willing to go and do that. There's too many times in our history where people that have had privilege did not speak out. And we have to stop that. It's over. We've got to be able to say, I'm going to be uncomfortable, because that's a small piece of uncomfortableness versus the families that are trying to advocate this in a position, in a totally different position. So I think that's the other part that we've got to be willing to say, I'm going to ask professional, I'm going to be persistent. I'm not going to take no for an answer. Unfortunately for us now, we've had a shift where we have now a bus to all of the 5 high schools in the district. So we get people out a lot closer to where they actually live. We said, okay, that's it's a good first step. We're going to keep going till we have it. But those are the type of things that I think as an educator, I just learned in my career, I just couldn't stay only in my classroom. I had to go further out. And so being able to advocate within the system that you have a voice. Sometimes you will be alone, but if you can find like-minded people, the voice is heard, the louder it becomes with more unified voices. So I would just encourage that to be willing to step up and say, hey, we have a role of advocacy. We have to stand and advocate for those students who are not able to.
Yeah. And I think a good litmus test for, especially for early career educators, you go into your classroom and you think you want everyone to be safe and happy and comfortable. And not everyone is going to immediately like you. Not everyone is going to be comfortable with everything you ask them to do. And so my test is, who is comfortable and who is not? And if the people who are uncomfortable are people who generally are comfortable in all other aspects of their life, then I made the right decision. Am I making my administrator uncomfortable so that my students are having a better experience? Well, that's the direction I want that to go. So I've just accepted that not everyone is going to like me. The comments are never always positive on anything anyone does. So where are those pushback comments coming from? And then that means I'm changing things for the better.
Thank you all for this amazing thoughts. And you're right? Like if we want to create change, it has to be in community, right? Collective action is necessary to make some of these changes. So we're getting almost to the end of our time here with the panel, but I saw a question on the chat, and it would be great if you could give us some insights and some thoughts to this question. What are some tips for building teamwork and STEM remotely?
I have a quick one that I think is pretty easy that I used with pretty great effect in classroom and on Zoom last year in breakout rooms, is I give students a lot of roles that they get to pick, but just giving students their job, they don't feel like they need to be bossy or anything. They're just doing their job. And so it helps us kind of leave some feelings about working with a group behind, and students get to fulfill their job. So that could be a facilitator, even someone who's a recorder or a materials manager, or they're the person who's checking the time, or they're the spokesperson. It can really help people, especially young people, feel comfortable working in groups.
Thank you, Johanna. Any other thoughts on how to build teamwork remotely?
Just trying to do a collaborative, for instance, an item like a Google slide that everyone's contributing to, and making sure that say, hey, we're working simultaneously, but yet we're saying this is our shared goal. And I think I love what Joanna said, I do that as well, saying the roles, and then what are we truly collaborating on together, like physically, even though we're not connected, but having that point is a really powerful one to make sure that we are developing that collaboration and learning not to type over people.
I do have a thought on this, right? One of the things that I have used in the past is platforms that help that collaboration to happen remotely, right? Like, for example, with some of the students that I've been working with and with some of the teachers that I've been working with, we use Slack. And Slack has all this kind of really great I guess, uses, right? You can share documents, you can share memes, you can share a lot of videos and links and all this stuff. And I think that it does help create that sense of a virtual community, right? And I know that it has worked really, really well for some of our students and the teachers that I'm collaborating with. So just another thought. And maybe your school district offers that kind of platform for their kids, right? That it's more kid friendly, depending on the grade level that you're teaching. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions, but maybe some closing thoughts from our panelists. Let's start with Dr. Velasco. Any closing thoughts?
Yes, just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Mejia, for moderating the session, and thank you to Dr. Revelo also for inviting us here to speak. It's my passion to always promote STEM education, to help students find success in feeling successful in doing STEM, so that they may thereby be encouraged to pursue STEM. And even if they don't pursue STEM, it's not something that I would discourage anyway, but I feel that even if they learn these skills from what they can take from the classroom, to me, again, I feel successful in that way. So I'm really glad to be here, and I'm really glad to be speaking on behalf of Advocacy for STEM. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Velasco. Johanna, any closing thoughts?
Just if you are ever at one of these things and somebody says something that excites you, please reach out to those people. You never know when we'll be at a conference together and we can get lunch and talk about grading or something. So I put my contact info in the chat, and I did just find Ramona on Twitter, and I was super excited. So just feel free to contact. I bet I can speak for the whole panel. Contact any of us if you need anything.
Thank you so much, Johanna. Bruce?
I would just say that I know for me, one of my goals as a teacher with the engineering piece, if my students don't see engineering as a helping profession, I'm not there yet. I want to make sure that students are able to understand that engineering is a helping profession, and it's a powerful piece. And to me, that's the most powerful, not necessarily, are you good in science and math? No. Do you see a passion to help people? Engineering very well could be a great profession.
Thank you, Bruce. And Ramon.
I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here today. It was a joy. And like I mentioned earlier, I heard that saying, be a fan of people, be a fan of educators. I'm a fan of these panelists on here. Your work is amazing. I'm just glad to be, sharing this panel with you all. You all are amazing advocates, game changers. And I think that's what sets the key, is that all of us here haven't been afraid to, maybe at the beginning of our careers we were, but now we have embraced who we are, and we're able to push that envelope, and we're able to make the changes that we need for our kids in order to promote STEM and continue to be the advocates that we are.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists for being here. Thank you to our attendees for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us, your sabiduría, and we look forward to hearing more from you and your successes, and sharing more of this amazing work that you're doing with us in the near future. With that, I'm gonna pass it on to Dr. Dora Renaud. She's the Director of Events Programming for SHPE National, to give us our closing remarks.
Hi, everyone. I need to start off by saying I am 100% emotionally charged right now from your energy. I want to bring you back to our year-long programming, all the events that we have throughout the year, and especially at our convention next year when we're in person. I need to have, this program grow, and you guys are definitely, I'm going to agree with Dr. Mejia, game changers in this field. So you are the foundation for what we do, and I appreciate your time and your words of wisdom. I wrote down a few. I love the 4-point grading, the no homework, the building the relationships, the reaching them before teaching them, all of those important terms that you use today. So you are now officially part of our SHPE familia. So thank you again. And so I just want to remind everyone that our convention next year is in Charlotte, North Carolina from November 2nd to the 6th. So mark your calendars, and we hope to bring you back and feel the enjoyment of this pre-college conference. This is our first ever educators track that is part of the pre-college conference, where we usually have about 500 high school kids there in person. So next year we'll bring everyone in. So again, to close out this entire educators track, I want to thank our sponsors again, Beats Unlocked by Facebook. I want to thank our committee chairs and our volunteers, especially Dr. Renata Revelo, with all the time and effort that she put into this. And I'd like to acknowledge our STEM Education Coalition that was on the very first panel. I want to bring that panel together with you guys as well, for providing us all the critical STEM information to support instructional practices. And then a few housekeeping items. We will be sending a thank you package if you provided your mailing address. We'll also be sending a post-event email with links, resources, and a post-event survey. Your feedback would be greatly appreciated so we can improve our program. And then the biggest part is our call to action. We invite everyone to become part of the SHPE familia and our mission to change lives by empowering the Hispanic community to realize its fullest potential and to impact the world through STEM awareness and access. And then begin a SHPE junior chapter at your own school and use our SHPE program resources. And thank you again. Have a great rest of the school year. Stay safe and well. Thank you, everyone.